This sample program demonstrates the increment and decrement operators, or the plus plus and minus minus operators, and I'm going to talk a little bit about postfix versus prefix notation. So let's just start in this main program. You can see I have two variables. Num starts off at 4, num1 starts off at 10. Now let's just talk about the increment, ways to increment num1. So if we wanted to increment num1 or, by 1, just add one value to it, there's 3 different ways we could do it. We could take the variable num1, add 1 to it, and store it back in num1. We could use the plus equal operator, which does the same exact thing, or we can use the increment operator, the plus plus operator. So these 3 statements are equivalent. And they're just different ways to increment the value of a variable. Similarly, you can decrement the value of a variable. So if you wanted to decrement num1, you could do this, or this, or this. Okay. Now, the increment and decrement operator are used frequently with loops, so that's why I put them in a lecture, a little lecture section back in Chapter 4, but we're going to talk more about them here because this is where you'll frequently see them in programming. They also have a pre and a postfix version. This is the postfix version where the increment operator comes after the variable, or the decrement operator comes after. There's also a prefix version where it comes in front. And when they are standalone statements, meaning they're not part of other statements, it doesn't really matter which version you use. But if you incorporate them in other statements, for instance a cout statement, like we'll see down here, it does matter the order if they're prefix or postfix. So if you look at this example, keep in mind num starts at 4. Alright, so cout num would display 4. Cout num plus plus. This will use the variable, meaning it'll cout the variable 4, and then it'll add 1 to it. So this will actually display 4. And then it'll add 1 to num, so num will become 5. So here, if it displays num, it'll now be 5. In this prefix version, this will add 1 to num, so it'll become 6, and then it'll output it. So this will add 1 to num and display 6. So this is just demonstrating, prefix versus postfix. This will use it or output it and then increment it. This will increment it and then output it. And the same thing is happening in these last statements. This will output num, then decrement it, and this will decrement it and then output it. So you can run this. I'm just going to add a system pause just to see how this works. And here you'll see the display. Okay, so that's just a little bit more about the increment and the decrement operator and how they work, either postfix or prefix. And again, they'll be used frequently in loops. That's why we kind of talk about them in more detail here. And so if you see them in a statement by themselves, the order of the operator doesn't really matter. It's only when you put them in either cout statements or within calculations where the order will actually matter.